Hey, this is Ina. I got asked what books I would recommend on Marxism, and that's such a broad topic. And I posted some answers to on the channel actual profile itself. But I do want to make a video for those of you who may want to know what I would recommend. Now, the truth is, this is not going to be an exhaustive list. It's not in any sense complete. It's just kind of what's coming to me on the top of my head. Some books I would recommend. Before I actually give you a list of books, I would urge you to check out also the influences on my practice as a historian. Those historians or authors are very much people you should read as well. For political economy, I would urge, for instance, Karl Marx wrote Wage, Labor, and Capital, which is an earlier look at the wage, labor, and capital relationship, and it's a very short work. It's fairly easy to read, and it really gives out some of the basics of pretty much why you're being screwed, why workers are being exploited. So that's a book you should check out, and it's normally you can normally buy that with Value, Price, and Profit, I believe, from international publishers. And these two together make up no more than, say, 150 pages. A book you should absolutely read, and it's not an easy read. It takes time, but I believe it's a very rewarding and important thing you should do is read Das Kapital. At the very least, read Volume 1. You should read Volumes 2 and 3. It took me about 6 weeks to read Volume 1. And it's not easy at many points, but this lays it out. This shows you the bare bones of what capitalism is, why we need to overthrow it, and why if capitalism actually followed its own rules that are laid out by Adam Smith, David Ricardo, and others, that, it's a horrendous system, which it is. But I actually did use many books to help me understand capital. One was by Ernest Mendel, called An Introduction to Marxist Economic Theory. This is a very short work. I don't believe it's longer than 80 pages. And I read it a few times before I started Capital, and laid out a lot of the bare bones of Capital. Another book that came out, I believe, last year, and I believe you can actually find videos of it as well, is David Harvey's Companion to Marxist Capital, and he goes through Volume 1 chapter by chapter, and he lays out Marx's argument there. It's a really great work to check out. And David Harvey writes in a very clear and understandable manner. Another book on political economy that I recommend is Naming the System by Michael Yates, which is a basic introduction to economics, and I reviewed it earlier. And Paul Sweezy wrote Theory of Capitalist Development in the 1940s, but it lays out a lot of the bare bones of Capital 1, 2, and 3 in a fairly easy-to-read manner. There are some parts there that are kind of difficult. And he also talks about, Lenin, Luxemburg, Bukharin, and their contributions to Marxist economic thought. And it still holds up fairly well, after almost 70 years. Another book that you should read, and it really talks about the contemporary working class, the skilling of labor, the effects of monopoly capitalism on labor, Taylorism, Fordism, is Labor and Monopoly Capital by Harry Braverman. Probably one of the best books on work you're ever going to read, and it really just shows like how once skilled jobs become de-skilled. Another book you should read, which this deals much more contemporary, is Neoliberalism by David Harvey, and it tells you about neoliberalism as the current form of capitalism we're forced to endure. I want to go a little further and talk about Lenin and the Russian Revolution in a sense. There's so many books on this, I'm just going to name a few. Lars T. Lee, who I've talked about his recent biography of Lenin, a great book you should read. You should also read, and this is not really that easy to read, but it's a great book, is Lenin Rediscovered. It looks at what is to be done, and it overturns this whole idea of Lenin as some conspiratorial elitist, and it really looks at Lenin as a great fighter for liberation and a great Marxist. It looks at his work, what is to be done. It really deconstructs a lot of the debates there. But it's a long, and at certain points it's kind of tedious, but it's a work you should check out. Tony Cliff wrote a 3 or 4 biography of Lenin. I've only read the first 2, but it really does a good job of laying out Lenin's political activity. Paul LeBlanc wrote probably the best single book I've read on Lenin and the Revolutionary Party, which is called Lenin and the Revolutionary Party. It looks at Lenin's ideas on the party from his earliest days to his death, and it looks at how those were carried out. It's very much a Trotskyist interpretation, but it's so well detailed, so well argued, that I highly recommend it. And if you want to see kind of how Lenin was dealing with the struggles that were developing in the Soviet Union at his death, I would definitely check out Lenin's Last Struggle by Moshe Levin. That's a very short book, no longer than 200 pages, easy to read, and it kind of shows you Lenin on the bureaucracy, on the national question, on the peasantry. Great book, and it shows you, and in a sense, it really separates him from Stalin in many respects. On China, well, I'll tell you the books that influenced my development and really helped push me in the Maoist direction, and that would be Edgar Snow wrote Red Star of China. He was not a communist. He was a sympathetic American journalist who visited Mao, talked to him, and this gives you a great portrait of China in the 30s, what the Communist Party was like, what they're trying to build at this really dark hour when China was threatened by Japan. And it really shows you Mao the person and this whole movement that he was so instrumental in. And that's a fantastic book to read. And that's actually fairly easy to find too. Another book you should check out on China is Charles Bettelheim's Cultural Revolution and Industrial Organization in China, which looks at changes in Chinese factories, about how managers refused with the rank and file, how new forms of worker control were developing. And it's just a great book. In fact, I think it's online if you look it up. And it really just shows you the effects of the Cultural Revolution in Chinese factories. And last on this list is probably the single best book on revolution I've ever read, called Fan Shen by William Hinton. This looks at land reform in a single Chinese village called Longbo, and you see these peasants who have been oppressed for decades and centuries rising up, dividing the land, confronting their oppressors, and it's so detailed. You see these people come alive because Hinton was there recording it. It's such a great book. You see a revolution living and breathing. And Hinton also wrote a follow-up called Shen, which looks at the village pretty much from 1949 to 1970. Also worth checking out. This is kind of an abbreviated list, and I don't want you to think that this is the be-all, end-all of stuff on Marxism to read. It is not. Many of these books have bibliographies in them with recommended reading. You should check that out. You should check out the footnotes they have. A lot of the introductory books are going to tell you, to further reading, read them. The best advice I can give to anyone who's interested in Marxism, aside from getting active in a relatively non-sectarian revolutionary organization, is to study, to read, to learn, and to make sure that you are not just checking out a lot of the books I'm recommending, but seeing what they're referencing in the bibliography, investigating for yourself. So this is Ina. Until next time.